Welcome back to the Lanterne Rouge Cycling Podcast for the Tour de France Stage 9 2022. A stage I thought would actually be a boring breakaway day, but it was much more than that. From Aigle, the UCI headquarters, we go around Lake Geneva, I think it is, north, very beautiful. Then, head north, come back, and then finish in Châtel-le-Port-du-Soleil, which is also near Aigle. They double back through it twice. And it's the first mountain stage where we have a 30-minute climb and multiple climbs, but it just isn't a big GC day the way I look at it. Benji and I have been saying it's the Monteguel stage since we first saw this, since November, October. And it's 13K is 4%, 8K is 7.5%, the Col de la Croix, and then descent, 20K flat valley, and then the Pas de Morgin, which is 12K 7%, but it levels off at the end. Then there's a descent, and there's a 4K 4%, 4.5% finish. So without satellite riders, you cannot hold a gap. It just doesn't look GC to me, Benji. And the intermediate sprints after the climb just doesn't scream GC. And a big break did go. A big break went with the runners we expected: Izagirre, Geschke, Conrad, Pollard as a tug buddy, all these sort of riders. And yeah, have you been surprised at how long it's taken for breaks to go? And I think my reason is the inexperience of the UAE flat domestiques, who don't let the right break go straight away. They chase things they don't need to.
I think it's a combination of both. I think, first of all, you've got the situation that we have today where so many teams are intrigued to get in the breakaway. We've got Groupama that wants to get in there with the likes of a Pinot, for example. We see that Kemna tried a few times, but eventually Conrad ended up in a breakaway. So that team is also willing to go in there. We see that a team like Bahrain, Lost Hague, for example, wants to get someone in the breakaway. Arkea wants to get someone in the breakaway. EF wants to try and get someone in the breakaway. All these teams want to get in the breakaway, so that means that once a group of 5 goes, another rider says, oh, my team is not in there, so I need to respond and be in there. So then the next team follows, and therefore the gaps get closed by other teams attacking every single time. So that's the one situation that leads to these long breakaway fights. But next to that, also, like you mentioned, the UAE team is a team that also here creates scenarios where, I think we spoke about it earlier in the stage or Too Long where Wout van Aert was trying to get in the breakaway 70,000 times. Well, here they try and have a rider every 5 to 6 positions to try and close the gaps that open up. And as a consequence of that being the case, these gaps are keeping themselves close. So there's no situation where a group of 5 gets away for a bit. They keep getting close. I'm not sure I can 100% blame UAE too much. I think that the first reason is the biggest one for me. The fact that so many people wanted to be in the breakaway today, I see that as the bigger reason. Or do you disagree with that?
No, that is the bigger reason. If eight teams before the stage, their directors have said we must be in the break today, and 6 are in a move, and 2 of the teams are not represented, those 2 teams will go crazy and will not stop until they're in it. And that just cycle, rinse and repeats over and over again, even when the break has gone.
Yeah, and we see that today as well. We saw that the first group of 15 riders goes up the road. The one with Pinot, with Uran, a rider on 340 roughly in GC. Bob Jungels, Conrad Verona, a rider that could potentially be a satellite rider for Mas in this race. Castroviejo, potentially a satellite rider for Ineos in this race. Plenty of other riders in there as well. And then a second group tries to get away a bit later once we've already had a bit of a phase where the peloton stopped for a bit.
I thought
another rider kicks on. Yeah, exactly. Thought it was gone in the first breakaway, but another rider says to themselves, perhaps I should go in the breakaway. And I think this triggered something because we were getting so close to the initial sprint, the intermediate sprint, that Wout van Aert probably thought to himself, well, if I can bridge to this breakaway with that second group, I can get full points here. This is a potential scenario for me. And we've also seen McNulty get into that second group. Do you think that McNulty triggered Wout to follow, or the intermediate sprint coming up?
So I've only watched it live once, but my reading of it is Total got the call. We're not in the break. Get the fuck in the break right now. Bosenhagen starts doing a bridge. I think it was Bosenhagen for Pierre de Latour. McNulty gets onto it because he's trying to shut down moves going. The other breaks at 30 seconds. He's like, no mass. They're trying to shut it down. Wout's on that. And then someone loses the wheel, and suddenly you've got Bosenhagen just towing Van Aert and McNulty. I think when McNulty goes, Wout or Jumbo-Visma have to then be represented when there's Movistar, Ineos, Bora all in the break, and now UAE being bridged to it. I think if you're going to be taken to the break for free, you have to go, especially with the IS. And so that's how the break formed. We had Total getting in it late. I will read out the whole list. Van Aert, Sturvens, the only one for Trek. Trek are having a shocking tour. Bob Jungels, who is very strong in Swiss. Uran on 340, as Benji mentioned. Pierre de Latour, Patrick Conrad, not Kemner. McNulty, Ugo Ull, and Guy Niv from Israel, but no Naylands or Woods. Woods crashed. Frank Bonnemore for B&B, who was very good last tour, but a bit less this year. Barguil for Arkea. Castro for Ineos. Luis Leon Sanchez for Bahrain. Pino for FDJ. Klosner Foy for Azure Desert. Geschke Pollard is a tugboat, as I said. Tug buddy, sorry. Verona, who won the Dauphiné stage, similar stage she'll finish to this. Dombrowski, Holsens, and Izagira, as I said yesterday, but it wasn't raining, so I didn't like it. It's a big break, Benji, and you see those names, and when I read them all off at the end of yesterday's pod, that wasn't as a joke. We knew there'd be a big break today. I thought UAE is just going to give it 6 minutes, 7 minutes, maybe not initially. Like, okay, look, let me do the ad read for Zwift first because it's getting hot as hell and I'm legit scared to ride outside in Andorra right now. You might think that's soft. Go and look at the weather forecast for Foy down the road from me next week. We worry that stage may be amended, cancelled, or shortened because the weather is getting crazy in the south of France and the Pyrenees right now. But the men's Tour de France, as you know, is underway, which means the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift is just around the corner. The Giro Rosa wrapped up today. We'll recap that in full tomorrow on our rest day pod. And Zwift are celebrating with a Watch the Fam mission that has kicked off. Complete up to 8 Watch the Fam events for your chance to unlock in-game kit on Zwift, but also unlock Tour de France Femme avec Zwift leaders jerseys signed by their eventual winner. Head to Zwift.com to find out more and start your free 7-day trial. We will obviously have a Tour de France Femme avec Zwift preview pod like we do for the Tour de France men's race. That will drop before the race. That race kicks off on the stage 21, Champs-Elysees. It's before the men's race, sprint stage, kind of inverse of the men's parcours. But Benji, big break bakery. The big break goes, I don't mind UAE keeping it tight before the first climb because she's fucked. He's on his last legs.
Yeah.
I think you flog she on the flat, keep it as tight as possible so that you don't have to bring back 8 minutes later. I think that point is fine. Or do you disagree?
I agree with that. You want to keep in mind that Uran has 340 roughly in GC and is in that breakaway. So every second that he gains, he gets closer. But if you think about the danger for Uran in GC, well, he's likely going to lose 5+ minutes in a future mountain stage. And that's like the low amount that he could lose in a future mountain stage. So let's say he loses 5 minutes, then you can give this guy 8 minutes in GC and not be overly worried about it in general. So 3 minutes that he's behind, plus 5 minutes that he would get ahead at the end of the stage. That's the scenario I'd be looking at as a worst case if you base on the stage as UAE. But you also got to keep in mind Wout van Aert is in that breakaway. I wouldn't care about that anymore if I'm UAE. Like, it's a satellite route, just like Castroviejo. For GC, it doesn't matter. He's on 28 minutes at the start of the stage, so that does not matter. The person you're reacting to as UAE is Uran in that breakaway. And
should they initially, though? Should they?
That's what I say. Like, he's on 3 minutes in GC. If you give him 8 minutes today, it's not the end of the world. If it's more than 10 minutes, I'd start getting relatively worried. I wouldn't want to see Uran 7 minutes ahead in GC anyway. Like, that's a bit much, personally.
I wouldn't. I'm the sort of director that would make you rather lose a tour to a sprinter because you stand on principle that we refuse to pace. But
you'd give Cavendish an hour.
Yeah, well, actually, yeah, I probably would. Except you'd OTL the stage. I think I tweeted it. This was a gift wrapped. UAE got a gift wrapped opportunity today to give the yellow jersey away to a non-threatening GC competitor to give him 2 to 4 minutes. Like, you'll never get a better opportunity. And Pogačar not only paced so hard or got his team to pace so hard that he kept the jersey, it looked like he wanted to win the stage as well. Like, they kept this at 3 minutes, 3:30. Bjerg was better today. She dropped on the first climb. Soler did Col de la Croix, pacing it really, really hard. And Soler's a good descender, so he's actually a big upgrade on the descents for them compared to McNulty last year. McNulty's still in the break. We don't really know why. Maybe as a satellite for the last climb to do a hard pace. It's very similar to the Lausanne finish, to the Longwy finish, where Pogačar's been better than all the other GC guys. I still think, though, Benji, there was a conversation. If you look, I took a note at 74 kilometers to go. Bennett was talking to Pogačar. I still think this is a heavy burden to put on your team for maybe 4-6 bonus seconds. Like, I didn't see Pogačar dropping anybody on Patamorjan, like anyone real.
Yes, certainly. And you get to the scenario where UAE is spacing like this in the peloton behind, and I think that our teams also keep that in mind. Like, low-key, we see the breakaway exploding at that very moment. Youngle's going off the front at the top of that bigger climb, the third last climb. And we see that in the valley afterwards, Wout van Aert tries to keep the second group up the road. And is that, you think, because he wants to keep that group up there, or is that because he wants to keep UAE pacing, or what do you think is the logic behind that?
Well, yeah, because just like the Conrad stage win last year, Jungels attacked with 60k to go. Everyone's like, ooh, bit early. No, because when the group is so big and not working, the break had been finessing constantly.
Yeah.
Like, there's no way Mikkel Bjerg on that climb is keeping the same gap to 20 guys of that quality keeping pacing. Or even Soler on Col de la Croix, which is 8k, 7%. Like, he's not to Izaguirre, Geschke, Verona, Castro, Wout. Like, they're finessing each other. And so Jung was like, we'll get caught if we keep playing this game. And so it was a brilliant move, like Conrad's last year on stage 16. And he obviously did the descent as full threat of death because Wout's heavy. Jungels, like, on this descent before the valley went completely mental. Pierre de Latour and Pinot attacked the sort of bigger engines, Castro, Verona, Wout, and then Latour lost 2 minutes on the descent. I shouldn't laugh because, like, he's not comfortable descending, but I don't know why he attacks so much. If he's just going to get dropped on the descent, gets in the way of Uran. And to answer, then circle back to your question, Benji, because Jungels was now 30 seconds up the road, and then it went to a minute before we saw cohesion in that group. I think the answer is Wout needed, and Castro, at least from my perspective, that group, some of those people to take away the remaining bonus seconds from Pogačar. Is my reading of it. I don't think Wout in that valley thought he could win the stage. Maybe he also thought if they stayed ahead, I don't know, he could be a useful satellite rider up the road. But there definitely was a switch in sitting on to him and Castro really starting to pull through, at least from what I saw.
I think so as well. And I think this displays the broadened battle for potentially seconds that we get on stages like these that are set to be breakaway stages beforehand. We see that UAE puts so much effort into keeping this breakaway so close, and like you said, they don't want to give that jersey away. Apparently, they keep it so close that they keep the jersey after a stage like today, that they don't give it away to someone like Uran. And next to that, they're spending so many riders.
But they kept pacing after that. When he was on 90 seconds, they're still hard pacing, and he's on 340.
Exactly. So I feel like the only reason that you're still pacing once the gap is 90 seconds, for example, is if you believe that you can still win the stage or get bonus seconds at the end of the stage. That's the only thing I see there. But is there some kind of like sunk cost fallacy in there where you're pacing so hard with like 5k to go, you still see that it's, oh god, it's still 40 seconds to a minute, but I'm going to keep on pacing anyway because we've been pacing this entire climb already, and otherwise it looks stupid if we pace the entire day and then stop pacing in the final 5 kilometers? Or do you see nothing like that in there?
I mean, I didn't get it. I think I they took a while to call it off. Like they definitely, I don't know if they called it off or they just couldn't do it because Micah, I don't think has it. I think Bennett is the strongest domestique they have uphill right now, and
Mhm.
Micah a bit less. Could be wrong on the big mountain stages, but
Ah,
could be. I don't know. I think Bennett's pulling for longer, and maybe I'm critiquing Micah too much because he's having to pull right at the pointy end of
yeah.
stages where it's harder to do that. But I think Pogačar is just really wanted bonus seconds. But back to the breakaway battle on Morjan, Bob Jungels, he's done the Valley solo. Maybe there was a bit of a tailwind. He's really strong in Swiss. Like he's a class rider. He's had injury and health problems, and he looks like he's back to almost peak level with this move. And he's on the climb, and I thought he was gonna just drop out. I was like, no way he can do a 12.5K climb,
Yeah.
or and there's longer than that afterwards against like Pino, Verona, Castro, and that's what we saw behind Benji. So Castro, Verona, Pino, Uran begin a counter move. Wout drops back, gives some bottles to the other guys. He couldn't make it to the top in front of them. Should Pino have sat on the engines who seemed to be working? I think he should have.
Um. I
He went
think.
too early. It was 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's true. It's true, but on the other end, I think just the entire group was probably at a point where they didn't believe that the victory was still there for them.
True. I don't know. I think maybe they weren't making any time. Maybe Castro and Verona weren't pulling Pino hard enough. Maybe if he sits on them, they
Yeah,
all just get
but
subsumed into the peloton.
panache, panache, my friend. The French want panache.
Well, I think he got close. But anyway, what happens is Bob Jungels on the climb. Pino takes a minute very, very quickly. He then stalls at a minute 03. We see there's 4Ks left in the climb on the graphic. I'm like, he's going to close it. It's down to 30 seconds when it says 3Ks to go. And I'm like, he's done. Pino's going to drop on the climb before I realize the graphic shows the last 3K false flat as the climb where it's advantage Jungels. And so Pino can't actually catch Jungels on the final of the false flat. And the gap is maintained at 22, 24 seconds. They get to the descent. Of course, Jungels is going to go faster, even though Pino did go as quick as he could. And it's Carlos Verona going for points. I don't think he did get some, I think. Today, yeah, he got 25. Is Verona and Castro pacing behind the two rouleurs for their respective teams, the Spaniards. And heartbreak for Pino. He's caught by those two in the final little uphill rise, but it's Bob Jungels for Azure Citroën on a day where their GC leader Ben O'Connor had a really tough day with, I think, a hip injury or muscle tear or something.
Yeah,
It doesn't look good. He's at the medical car all day, dropped early. On a day to forget from that perspective, they win a huge mountain stage in the first week before the rest day. I was ecstatic for Bob Jungels, the Luxembourger, because, yeah, he's had a lot of health issues. He's 29, former winner of Liège, Baston Liège, and he wins his first Tour de France stage in an absolute classic style. So, yeah, Jungels is back, Benji.
yeah. I'm so happy to see Jungels do that after a plethora of injuries. After, like, he switched a bit from like GC back in the day to being a cobble rider for a bit at Quickstep, and then he had his bad period where it was injury related that he had a bad period, and now he's able to come back with his climbing and so forth after a good Tour de Suisse. I love seeing Bob do this, and we've been happy with Pinot victories before. I think Pinot will win another stage in this Tour de France at some point. I believe he's strong enough in the breakaway that he should be able to do that. But today was not his day. Today was Youngles' day, and happy to see him do that. But when it comes to Ben O'Connor, why is he still at this race? Like, I feel like he shouldn't be at this race anymore. I don't know why. It's like there's a pattern with Groupama and Age Desert both being teams that keep their riders that are basically half injured in races. We saw it with Pinot back in the day in the Tour, with Gaudu with a broken back at some point. Like, we've seen it a few times with these two teams, and I don't know, is that a pattern or am I just imagining that?
Well, so FDJ lost the best part of 2 years of Pinot's career because he finished the Tour de France 2020 with a completely fucked back. They then had Gaudu in Paris Nice this year nearly finish outside the time limit in the Paris Nice TT after Groenewegen, who was probably doing it on a tricycle. And they said there's actually nothing wrong with him that we can see, apart from the fact that he nearly finished OTL on the TT. They were hoping that he can somehow miraculously win the Vosges finish uphill. Of course, I think it later came out Benji had like a fracture in his back or a back injury. And I don't know, these guys are young. Like Pinot was young, Godou is young, O'Connor is young. They're your GC contenders for the future. Like GC's done for O'Connor. And whether he can win a stage, not in this shape. I don't know how you're going to rehabilitate, especially when they're MPCC team. And I think Cortico TUE's a banned this year anyway in race for all teams. Like, you're not winning a stage like this. And so he's a very valuable asset, and mentally it's not good to struggle like this, even though I commend him for at least getting through. I don't know if he got through today. So he should abandon. Same thing for MVDP, Benji. I think Alpecin just floundering, and they're just hoping that MVDP can come good. Now, he did do a lead out yesterday, so maybe he will come good, but I don't know. I'm not a fan of guys below the weather continuing races.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that completely. And it's something we notice a few times now with multiple teams. Perfect example with Van der Poel indeed. But when it comes to a few teams that we've seen, like Alpecin is one of those teams that hasn't done anything yet. But then I look at a team like Lotto Soudal, for example, also very limited performances so far. Astana was more expected. I think a BNB has been basically the only thing I've seen of BNB is the one time that they dropped with two riders in that breakaway in the first week from
Bonnemore's
Bischkema
not
and
the
Magnus
same
Kort.
as last year. Bonnemore's not the same level as last year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Mozzado's been all right. I think Mozzado's been all right.
Top 10s 3 times or something. That's pretty good. But like, what are you gonna buy with it 3 times top 10? Even as even if you're a Pro Conti BNB team, I don't see loads of value in that
contract. It's what
at a different team.
This is a problem with team balancing, Benji. This is why everyone's like, "Well, you're just always plugging Jay Vine." Well, I'm like, what else are Alpecin going to do on a stage like this? Like, no good sending Sylvain Dillier in the break. Like, at least Vine's going to maybe do something. But anyway, we haven't talked about GC enough. Back in the peloton, when it was clear that they wouldn't catch the break on the false flat uphill, it appeared that McNulty, I don't know when McNulty got called back. We never saw GC group. But it was clear that UAE stopped chasing the stage with about 3Ks to go on that climb, the false flat section. They conserved Micah, and Bennett, I think, was done. And then we see eventually in the finish line shot that Pogačar sprinting for the line. So I'm guessing, not sure if you got any intel from anywhere, Benji, but I'm guessing that Pog got Micah and McNulty to give him a bit of a lead out so he could sprint for some time because the bonuses were all gone.
That's also
okay?
That's also the assumption that I'm making. I also don't have intel on that, but we don't see those two riders still in the group or behind them. So it would be surprising that Pogačar just goes solo away from everybody in the final kilometer. They also took back quite a bit of time to the breakaway in that final stretch. So it would mean that a tempo change had happened towards the end, is what I would be guessing in that final stretch. So I'm guessing that, just like you said, we had a bit of a lead out that we did not see on the screen because they were showing Thibaut Pinot instead. And then we had Pogačar sprinting to the line. And does that show anything? Would you have seen Chris Froome do this in the past? Obviously, Chris Froome's a rider that does not have that kick, so he might not have the belief that he can gain time with a move like this. But did Geraint Thomas do that in the Tour that he won? Because he was the kind of rider that did take time in the final 200 meters of stages, for example, on competition to do that for GC. Or does this feel a bit desperate from the likes of Pogačar to try and gain like 3 seconds on the likes of a Thomas and Roglic on a stage like this?
I mean, if you can just do a sprint and gain 3 seconds, I don't think there's a problem. I think that's worthwhile. That's much less effort. Like, you're there now. It's less effort than pacing for 4.5 hours. He didn't take, and maybe Jonas drops the wheel, and then once he's lost the wheel, you can take some seconds on him. But Jonas keeps the wheel. Pogačar does take 3 seconds on Thomas, Yates, Mas, Quintana, Caruso, Bardet, Godou. Roglic hangs on at the back of those guys. Pidcock's on a little gap. He finished on 7 seconds to Pogačar. In terms of GC guys today, Vlasov lost more time despite a
Yep.
good day yesterday. To Pog, he lost like 27 seconds. Just having another look.
Martinez,
Martinez, yeah, I'm trying to find him.
he's
Where
gone.
is he? He's gone. He's not on 12 minutes. Or is PCS? Danny Felipe Martinez lost 16 minutes. So yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised, but yeah, O'Connor lost
Domestique.
27. Yeah, he's a domestique now. Um, and I guess it's a shame Pidcock wasn't in the break either, because I worry about Pidcock. Like, if Pidcock's getting dropped on this finish, Benji,
Hmm.
that's perfect for him. Then I worry about him on Granon and the others. Although he's doing a fine job for a first Tour de France man. But the question I want to ask is, and I've seen some of it on Twitter, and listen, I've I bashed Jumbo-Visma for um, for winning a Tour de France stage yesterday. I didn't bash them, but I was like, "How dare you win a Tour de France stage?" But I'm going to go in defense mode today. People saying, "Why
What?
didn't they attack an exposed
Oh, okay.
UAE?" It's like the finish doesn't suit Jonas. Roglic says his back hurts. I don't think he's lying because he came in last in that group. I'm pretty sure Roglic normally is a bit punchier than Enric Mas in a finish like this. And like, if they Pogačar also still did have teammates. He had McNulty ahead. Jumbo-Visma had no one ahead. If they just set nuclear pace on Morjan and launch Jonas, he has to do 3Ks falls flat uphill against McNulty and then 4Ks 4.5%. Like, and then like be like, just attack, just attack, just attack. Like, no, like, what do you mean? Like, even though it's hot conditions, Jonas is 58 kilos and Pogačar had teammates at 66 kilos, and the finish is perfect for Roglic, but Roglic is banged up. So I think they did a perfect thing today, lost no time with Jonas. Rog lost only 3 seconds. I think if they pace really hard, Rog could be in trouble today.
I agree, and it goes to the bigger picture of today as well. Like, we see that UAE spends so much energy first on Hirschi and then on the likes of Soler, basically all their riders in a row. Bjerg, then Bennett was pacing. Then we saw Micah and McNulty having to spend much as well today. And those riders spending all that energy is energy that might not be there next week. Although we have a rest day tomorrow, I don't think riders just lay in bed for a day and it instantly pops back up to 100%. I don't think it's that easy when it comes to being a cyclist. But next to that, Jumbo's seen with like how many riders? 6 riders on the final climb. And Wout van Aert was one that was ahead. If he's not in that breakaway initially, he might play a longer role there. That team is looking very strong here. And like you say, I believe that if Jumbo decides to take it up on the final climb or Ineos decides to take it up on the final climb, then they are basically creating a scenario where likely if they catch the breakaway, Pogačar wins the stage. And if they catch any rider that is in the top 3, Pogačar takes bonus seconds away from them. So I think it was a good decision in hindsight to not take over with the team on that final climb. And I'm saying in hindsight, but I had this take already when they were on the final climb because I didn't see the value in taking control from that point onwards. The only value that I saw with Van Aert being in the breakaway and so forth was trying something early on that Col d'Aqua, for example. But looking at Roglic at the finish line and so forth, I'm not sure he's in the shape to go for long. And there's no one else in their team that can go for long because I wouldn't do it with Jonas so early. So I think that's the kind of take I have on it right now. So I don't see an issue with Jumbo doing what they did today. When it comes to Wout being in the breakaway and not doing much towards the end, I think it's basically just having Wout in the breakaway just in case that he can be used. Like satellite riders being in the breakaway doesn't instantly mean that every race scenario will allow you to use that satellite rider. It will become sometimes a situation where you can't use that satellite rider, where you can't use Wout van Aert. And today that kind of felt like it. In the end, he did give some water bottles. So I guess the entire plan of Jumbo today in regards to Wout was getting those water bottles to the team. But anyway, like, I agree with you. I agree that I see more issues with how UAE took up the stage today.
In what world is Jonas getting separation from Pogačar
Not today.
on the Morjan climb? And I agree, you don't know if you don't try, but you
Hmm.
should try on terrain which is conducive to the GC guy you have.
Yeah.
We have on stage 11 and stage 12. Today, I think damage limitation, UAE paced for 4 hours, blowing through their team. If your enemy's making a mistake, don't interrupt them. And yeah, I mean, the counter argument is, well, UAE false paced the climb like Ineos did on Agual because Pogačar might have been vulnerable. And if you just put Kuss or Kruijswijk to pace a little bit, you could have exposed Pogačar very easily. I agree. I do think McNulty up the road changes that a little bit. McNulty's a truck, and he'd been sitting on the brake the entire day. And if he starts pulling that shallow sectional 4Ks 4%, you're done, even though Castro's up the road. So I just think, yeah, I understand why Jumbo and Ineos didn't try anything. I think Ineos is just trying to survive, to be honest. Like, I mean, although like they got the Yates and Thomas, like when are they going to try? I guess. But yeah, anything else from this stage, Benji? I'll remind everyone the GC standings: Jonas on 39 behind Pogačar, Thomas 117, Yates 125, Godu 138, Bardet 139, Pidcock in 7th on 146, Mas 150, Paulus 155, Quintana 213, Roglic 252, and Uran and Martinez completely drop out of GC. I think Uran's on 941 now. So I was like, no need to pace after Uran. Everyone's like, you don't know what could happen. It's like, yes, if Pogačar can't take 4 minutes back on Uran, then he should just stay in the rest day hotel and not turn up to stage 10. Like, come on now. But yeah, any last thoughts on this stage? Do you think UA will feel it, or do you think what else is the purpose of Mikkel Bjerg other than to just pace?
When it comes to Bjerg and Hirschi, I have less of an issue with it than having Soler, Bennett, and Sefov doing the same tempo to
Soler
keep it
paced
up so
hard.
hard towards the end. Yeah, like, but Soler also dropped, by the way, with Hirschi early in the stage. So he's also not looking good, for example, when it comes to his form. I don't know, it's a team that already lost a man in their team. I think they're going to feel it in week 2. I think those Alp stages will be really hard for them. And I'm extremely curious what will happen when Jumbo starts taking it up on a longer climb, and how many people of a team of UAE will still be left when that happens. And I think we can talk through those scenarios on the rest day pod, right?
Yeah, the rest day podcast will give our predictions for week 2. We'll preview stage 10, which could be a similar stage to today, to be honest. And we'll say who we think will win the Tour de France. And yeah, I think I don't know. Everyone's telling me I'm insane, and I don't think I'm a flat earther. I'm back off. I don't think I'm a flat earther. I think I'm going more back to the Big Short territory.
Yeah.
But I would
One
say
more
that if
thing.
you believe the Earth is flat, you don't know you're insane.
One more thing. I think the riders are being tested for COVID by a PCR test tonight. That's at least what I read on Twitter by Jose Bain, and I do trust her tweets most of the time. So when it comes to these COVID tests, we've had more riders this morning. I completely forgot who's out of the race, but they probably were important for the race.
Bouchard's out, and Ruben Guerrero. I'm sorry, Guerrero not COVID, other unrelated illness.
And another rider, but I don't remember which one, but he's also out, that random person in the peloton. Anyway, there might be some other people dropping out in the coming days. There's a lot of riders that are underperforming towards what I would expect from them, but I hope that we have a full peloton once we start in McGav. Yeah, I think their doctor is out.
Quickstep, like half the staff, haven't they, tested positive for COVID?
Yeah.
And the Askren pulled out with an injury today, and the rest of the team is like gruppettoed all day. So, like Maggioli Honore. So, I don't know. Hopefully, everyone's okay tomorrow. But yeah, that's all from us today. Thanks to Zwift as always for supporting the podcast. Stay tuned for our Giro Rosa recap tomorrow and our Tour de France Rest Day podcast. And we'll see you then. Ciao.